What do this guy and this guy have in common? Well, not much. He's a film director from the 1980s. He's a modern superstar. But what binds them together is love for synthwave. John Carpenter is a pioneer of the genre, using old school analog synthesizers to create that sound we love today so much. And The Weeknd is a modern artist that uses those vibes to introduce a whole new generation of people to synthwave. Synthwave music really compromises lots of different genres that use the aesthetic and the sounds from the 1980s. The movie Drive 20 years ago was instrumental in recreating interest for this amazing type of sound. As a result, today our objective is going to be to create a synthwave track. And I'm going to take you through the process that I use to create these awesome sounds. First, I'm going to take you through the equipment that I have, how it's all connected. Then, I'm going to take you through the sounds and why do we use the sounds that we do. And third, I'm going to take you through the arrangement. How do we weave these things together to create synthwave? But stick around, because after that, I'm going to do a live performance using these elements I covered, so you can see how in practice this can be performed. Please subscribe to this channel. If you have other questions of interest, make sure to write it down in the comments and boot that bell icon so you can be notified each time I post new content, which is every Friday. See you on the other side. Okay, let's make some synthwave. So first, let's cover the equipment we're going to be using today. Here we have circuit tracks. All the musical and MIDI information lives in here. For example, I have bass in MIDI channel 1. This MIDI signal is going to the Moog subsequent 25, which is playing the bass part. In MIDI channel 2, I have the main melody. That's being fed to Oberheim DO5 here. We also have some samples, mostly Lin drum type percussion to fill out the space, and some ear candy. So the clock information is also being sent out via MIDI to all these instruments, including the Minilogue XD, which is going to be playing pads using its own sequencer, and then Drumbrute Impact, which is serving as our drum machine here. There's some processing going on as well. For example, the bass from the Moog is going first through Nemesis delay using the the digital style delay, and then going to Strymon BlueSky for reverb, plate reverb in this case. Finally, the hi-hat and snare from the Drumbrute is going through analog heat here in order to saturate it and give it a bit more high-end sparkle by using its equalizer as well as the high-pass filter. All this stuff is going into this mixer. So that's your basic setup here. Note I will also be using the internal arpeggiator from DAW5 here in a certain part of this synthwave track. So much for the equipment. Let's talk about sounds. What are the sounds that we need to use if we're trying to achieve that synthwave sound? Well, let's start with the drums and see what we have. Kick and snare. Now, Drumbrute Impact is an analog drum machine. It's actually not the best drum machine if you're trying to make synthwave because it has lots of low end. It's kind of lacking in some of the high end. So what I did here with a kick drum, I'm using the saturated version of the kick drum, so it has a little bit more body, and I EQ'd the hell out of it in order to boost the upper mid frequency, and I also decreased the low frequencies a little bit to bring it a bit closer to the Lin drum type kick. Snare. Well, this is sort of a classic snare with the always necessary reverb if we're making synthwave. So the reverb is actually coming from the mixer. I'm using the studio reverb because it has a nice amount of high frequency content and it's a bit gated, which is very similar to the 80s gated reverb sound, which was so critical during that era. Hi-hats. Okay, here we're using the filter on the hi-hat and the snare to kind of get it in its sweet spot. So here is no filter, a lot of low end on that snare. You'll notice the difference, especially when we put in the bass. Okay, let's do that. Now, if we have no high pass filter on this snare, it really overwhelms those notes when it hits. As soon as we put that high pass filter on there, now the bass pops more. You'll also notice that the drums are very simple, okay? Right? 16 notes on the hi-hat, 2 and 4 on the snare drum. There's a couple other percussions in here for pizzazz, okay? So that's drums, and we can also talk about a bass right now. Let's kill some of this using a square sub oscillator, a blended wave between a sawtooth and a triangle for the oscillator number 1. The triangle gives a bit more clarity and low end oomph, and then a saw wave oscillator for the second one, also an octave above, to give it more clarity in the mix. The decay is set to really work rhythmically, so the bend of the pluck really works with the rhythm, hopefully. What about the lead? Let's listen to that. So again, this is actually a blended sawtooth square wave, 2 oscillators, also a bit of noise. So this is no noise. It's a little bit noise, just gives it that pop, and we also have a sub oscillator that's also square working. There's some reverb, not much, so this is no reverb. This is the reverb we have, as well as some, again, analog style delay. This is lots of depth. Okay, so that's our main Weeknd style melody. Let's talk about the pads. Now, pads are actually programmed in the sequencer of Minilogue XD. Let's hear them. Not too much delay. It's a tape delay. You can hear that the pitch is shifting slightly. Okay. Open the filter, we can hear the lovely chorus made iconic by the Juno synthesizer in the 80s. So this is providing our background and our padding. Releases, you'll notice it's too long because I didn't reset it after another jammy run. We want those notes to end before the next ones. Somewhere around here, so that they barely overlap in their tails. Now we can also use the arpeggiator here. Okay, we mistimed this a little bit, which is what happens. So we'll try that again. Okay, that's better. Okay, we're a little off on the timing here, but that's okay for this. So that's a bit of an overview of the sounds we have and why we have the sounds that we do. All right, let's talk about arrangement. So in terms of the arrangement, I've kind of made two parts. There's that basic part with the key melody and then the bass playing the supporting role. We're going to make sure that you can hear the bass here. Either the bass is in the foreground or now the melody is in the foreground. So this is kind of a basic verse, if you wish, or A part. Then in the B part, what we're going to do is basically introduce those chords here and use that arpeggiated bass. Gotta get that release the right length. You can play with your arpeggiator here. And then we can kind of go back to the main melody. This is kind of our main part, and we can add additional excitement, adding some randomness for some additional fills, or adding more pads here. So I hope this gives you a sense of how we can arrange this. Stick around for the live performance. Well, that took it out of me, but it was amazing. I hope you enjoyed this video and that it was useful for your own synthwave exploration. Please don't be shy, ask questions in a comment, make suggestions about what other synthwave related content you may be interested in. Well, next time.